Warning. The following episode of Steelshod contains themes of graphic torture and sexual violence. If you are uncomfortable with these themes, a vague description of the events can be found in the description below. Thank you. When they reach the Svardic camp, their wounds are seen to by a Casseline medico. Soon there is confidence that neither Unferth, nor Hubert, nor Leona are in danger of immediate death, and so all three of them, plus Cyril, are brought before Bjornsson and a few of his closest advisors. Leona is, of course, stripped of her armor and weapons, Hubert is stripped of his robes, and the mail shirt he wears hidden beneath his robes, and his alchemical bandolier, and the poisoned needles he keeps in the sleeves of his robes, and the lockpick he keeps hidden in the lining of his robes, and you get the idea. Hubert and Leona are stripped down to their undergarments and forcibly seated in simple wooden chairs. Bjornsson looks over them, unimpressed. Just a fat old man and a well-built farm girl. He tells Cyril to get answers out of them. Defenses, numbers, strategies, weaknesses, names, everything. Cyril looks Hubert and Leona over, opts to start with Hubert. He approaches the old monk, knife in hand, and asks him to identify himself. Hubert meets Cyril's eyes with a twinkle that seems entirely out of place. "Hello," Hubert says warmly in flowing Lorinet. "They call me Brother Hubert, friend, and who are you?" Cyril is slightly surprised to hear his mother tongue. He gives a mocking bow. "Cyril Tybalt Duchamp, at your service." "And what the devil are you doing here with these folks, Monsieur Duchamp?" Hubert asks. Some of Bjornsson's advisors seem uncomfortable with them speaking in Lorinet, but Unferth and Bjornsson are fluent, so they listen along just fine. "That would be my own business, Brother Hubert," Cyril says. "After all, you are here to answer our questions, not the other way around." Quite, Hubert says. He winks at Cyril and hums a little tune as the Lorinet approaches him. Cyril feels a momentary flutter in the pit of his stomach, as if he just swallowed something distasteful. He ignores it, unable to recognize the signs of a Malocchio, an evil eye. Cyril shows Hubert the knife up close, explains he will be forced to use it if Hubert does not tell them everything Bjornsson wishes to know. Hubert nods sagely. Cyril tests the edge, opening a thin, stinging cut across Hubert's arm. Hubert shivers. "Oh dear, stop, he groans. Cyril pauses expectantly. "Beg pardon, Cyril? I can call you Cyril, can't I? Just a forewarning." Hubert affects an almost embarrassed expression. "I once knew a woman that gained immense gratification from even rather horrific amounts of pain. Unsettling in a sense, but it was also beautiful. I've truly tried, but it just hasn't worked for me." Cyril and the Svards look at this strange old man in quizzical disgust as he rambles on. "I just tell you this so you know, Cyril, if I manage to achieve that rather unique road to climax, do forgive me. I know that's not why you'll be hurting me, so I feel it would be almost sort of a liberty taken with you. You're not consenting to a carnal encounter with me, of course, so please just be patient. I assure you that I'll try my best to answer all of your questions once I've finished." Cyril is almost speechless. Strange words from a Tarathi priest is all he can think to say. Hubert just grins at him. "And who said I was a Tarathi priest exactly?" Cyril has no clever retort for this, falling momentarily silent. "Well then," Hubert says, "where were you? Torturing me, yes?" "Not if you tell us what we ask," Cyril says. "Oh, I don't know much, Cyril. Just a silly old man, after all." Annoyed, Cyril slashes Hubert again. Hubert shivers, takes a deep breath. Cyril asks another question, about the number of serpentes and their composition. Hubert just grins at him. Cyril is growing impatient. He widens the incision on Hubert's arm, slices deep, leveraging the thin, razor-sharp blade beneath Hubert's skin. Hubert keeps breathing in irregular, panting breaths, not unlike someone in the throes of ecstasy. Cyril still finds it incredibly off-putting, but he labors on. Leona, meanwhile, has begun screaming at Cyril to stop. Cyril calmly tells her that if she answers the questions instead, he will happily do so. Problem is, Leona doesn't know the answer. She's utterly ignorant of the defenses, tactics, numbers. She does her job, she fights alongside her friends, and that's all she's ever needed to know. Cyril can work with this. He's opened up Hubert's arm and begun strumming his tendons, eliciting pained gasps from the old monk that he can't play off as sexual pleasure. He presses Leona on the one thing she knows: the people of Steelshod. She tells them names, styles. It's relatively inconsequential in the scheme of things, but it's still something. Cyril presses her to tell them more about Alexander and Joran. What are their weaknesses? How can they be manipulated? Driven to fear, or anger, or recklessness? And finally Hubert breaks. He declares that he will speak if Cyril eases up on the pain. Cyril does so, taking a small step back. Hubert's blood has run down his arm into a pool on the ground. The old man grimaces, flexing his blood-soaked hand. Hubert shifts his eyes to Ter Bjornsson, and when he speaks he uses the Svardic tongue, not Loranet or Middish, and all ears in the tent hear his words. He speaks of Alexander and Joran, of the demons, sorcerers, and monsters they have vanquished, of the star-steel sword Alexander carries that slew an ancient god of the Thalmati, of Joran and his ability to pass through walls, slay his foes unseen, and walk away unharmed. Weaknesses? Hubert says, laughing. You are not so lucky. They have come for you, and now there is nothing on God's green earth that will keep them from you. At times, Hubert's Svardic seems to falter, and he chokes his way past unfamiliar Svardic words. Many in the tent feel a growing sense of dread and unease, Cyril included. Suddenly, Ter Bjornsson rises from his huge seat. Unferth, silence him, he commands. The Bearsark promptly muffles Hubert's face with one giant hand. Everyone calm yourselves. Bring me the High Priest, Ter Bjornsson growls. One of Hakon's pupils, High Priest Jerk, arrives shortly. He immediately senses the cloud of Vlari blood magic Hubert has cast over the room, instilling in them a sense of fear and dread. He dips his hands in Hubert's blood and paints Cyril and the other advisors with a dab of it, speaking of Vlari incantation as he does. Watch him, Ter Bjornsson commands the priest. Jerk nods and keeps a vigil over Hubert as Unferth removes his hand. Hubert shrugs meekly. Can't blame a chap for trying, can you? He asks with a sheepish grin. Unferth clocks Hubert across the face. He's done watching Cyril work. He draws his own knife and goes to Leona. She spoke to end your pain, he says to Hubert. He slices across her shoulder and Hubert narrows his eyes. I think you will speak to end hers. Unferth begins cutting up the Spitalian woman, and Hubert's bravado and schemes fall apart as easily as that. But still, he doesn't give them what they want. I'm sorry, my dear, he says softly. It's okay, Hubie, Leona says through gritted teeth. Not your fault. She looks at Unferth. You, she hisses. I will kill you, bear man. Good, Unferth says. Embrace your animal nature. Let's continue. Unferth cuts her again and again, finally culminating in him slicing off most of her left ear. Leona screams in pain and unleashes a string of Spitalian curses. Cyril, for his part, finds all this rather uncomfortable. Torturing the monk is bad enough, but disfiguring a woman doesn't sit well with him at all. Boy, he really won't like what comes next. Unferth observes that Hubert may be laboring under the mistaken idea that only Leona's body is at risk. He asks Ter Bjornsson if he can take the woman back to his tent, to use her and prepare her for a much more invasive interrogation tomorrow. Ter Bjornsson nods, waving them on. The Jarl has watched everything impassive, even as some of his other advisors excused themselves. Clearly, Ter Bjornsson takes no joy in the torture, and equally clearly, he is not especially bothered. He's just empty. emotionless. When Unferth drags Leona away, Terbjornsson stands. He goes to leave, dismisses everyone, tells Cyril to secure Hubert to the chair, and posts 2 berserks outside the tent. Cyril, Hubert says, a pleading tone leaking into his voice. Cyril pauses, looking back. What is he doing to her? Unferth. Cyril frowns. I am quite certain I do not want to know, mon ami, he says. He doesn't wait for Hubert's reply, instead just walking out of the tent. Unferth takes Leona to his own tent. First he rapes her. While it happens, she struggles against him. He encourages her to fight harder. Leona manages to draw his knife and stabs him with it. He ignores the blade sticking out of his side and pins her hands down. He continues to encourage her to struggle, to fight. He smears his blood across her face. He growls in her ear, bites her shoulder. The longer it goes, the longer a feeling of nameless, formless rage and fear and pain consumes Leona. She fights harder and harder, and the more she fights, the more vigorously Unferth fights back. Everything Unferth does has the sociopathic dual qualities that defines him. Animalistic, primal, vicious. Normally driven by rage and lust and passion and emotion, but he does it all emotionlessly. It's like he's going through the rote steps of being a beast of insatiable hungers, but he could be as reserved and calm as a monk if he chose to be. Soulless. By the time he is finished, Leona is a shivering, shaking wreck. She feels violated at a far deeper level than just her body. He drags her back to the tent, lashes her to the chair across from Hubert. Her clothes are shredded, blood-soaked rags. Hubert says her name, softly, horrified, and she barely seems to notice. Enjoy your night together, Unferth tells Hubert. I doubt you'll have another. Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the PayPal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.